Morning, everyone. I know I haven't done a video in a while, but just been busy with some traveling and other playing games and whatnot. So, we are on round 5 of the Cinco tournament. It's going okay. So this is my list. I have 49 points. I have a 9, a 17, a 7, and a 16. To be honest, all 4 of those games probably could have gone the other way. The 9 and the 7, I would say, was pretty close to busting through at a point. They were a pretty shooty list. One was a really shooty ogre list with like 3 big units, and one was a divination shooty triple treatment list. And like I said, I almost broke through them. The 2 wins were versus Dark Elves, which are always tight games. I do think, not necessarily my opponents, but just generally the scene values Dark Elves as really good versus Warriors, and I don't think they are, personally. I think it's even. If you have a Herald, I think it's even. If not, sometimes slightly easier it depends on a lot of the Dark Elf stuff too. Like if the Dark Elves have tons of infantry or not much shooting, or if they have Cosmo over Evo, it gets easier. I think Hydras are decently good versus Warriors. Gorgons are good versus Warriors. So it just depends on the build, to be honest. But I think it's more even than people give credit for. I think all the single models are still a pain in the ass. If you play just Smash Mouth in your face, you're going to lose probably to the Dark Elves, even though I'm very aggressive against them, but you still got to be smart about it. But I can make a video on that, the Dark Elf versus Warriors matchup. But to be fair, I guess some of it is the math doesn't lie. I think there's been 9 Warriors versus Dark Elf matchups in this tournament so far, and we've only won 3, and 2 of them were me. So maybe it's just not a particularly easy one. I know, like I said, I've done it a good bit of times. I've lost it once, maybe twice to Dark. No, I lost it twice. I lost to Thomas once, but you lose to Thomas, you lose to Thomas. Nonetheless, the list has been okay. So here's the list I've been running in this event. If you're a fan of my videos, if you've watched them, you know that you're not going to come here and see some magical new idea, right? We're Herald players. We play the Sorcerer. I mean, in fact, most of this videos and talking and work is towards creating a list that we feel is really, really good. Now, obviously, ETC is not for a year. There's going to be point changes. There are going to be meta changes. But let's just say ETC was, say, 2 months from now, right? This would be the time where I don't want to make sweeping changes. I've been playing this list. It's been working. I want to make changes, tweaks that I think are putting it in the right direction of the meta and how I like to play. And so that's pretty much what I'm doing. I mean, I'm trying new ideas, and maybe, there will be new ideas here and there, and sometimes we'll play lists that are maybe off the wall for our sake. But yeah, if you want to come here and see super weird shit, like a bunch of Fallen units, it's not going to happen. So this is the list we were playing. Starting from the top, these 2 models will never be bad to me. Herald is usually MVP of most games. That has actually brought up the conversation of why don't we take 2 Heralds, and usually we'll eventually try it, I think, but I think the big reason is you can't fit the Sorcerer guy on the Chariot, and then you have to put him on foot, and then it feels weird, then you have a lot of magic. It's like you have 3 Adepts, and I don't know, it gets to be this weird, the second Herald, one Herald on its own, right? He provides magic, he provides manifestations, he's just a great piece. I think there are some diminishing returns on the second Herald. And the reason that would be, and not saying it's bad, I still need to try it, but the reason being is, especially if you're going to take, because you really want the Alchemy Magic, because I feel like the Alchemy Magic is really good with this army. And so if you don't take the Alchemy Magic and you just take 2 Heralds, your Magic's a little worse. I mean, you still have 6 spells, so you still should be okay. But let's just say you want to keep the Magic set up and add a second Herald. So you lose the Chariot, which is pretty, not devastating, but it's a pretty big deal, in my opinion. But even more so, it's just the first Herald gives you access to like what you need, right? You play against an army, you're like, oh shit, I need Breath Corruption, I need to fly, I need Stubborn, blah blah blah, and you feel like, great, I got what I needed out of my Herald. I got the best manifestations I could choose, whatnot. And then you get the second guy, and sure, there's going to be matchups where he still is super hard to deal with, blah blah blah, but I don't know. I feel like you're not going to get as much out of the magic because you're already going to take the best, quote-unquote, best spells on your one Herald, and then is he worth 820 points as just a pure combat piece if you assume his spells are not getting the full value because you already got the good spells on the other guy? I don't know. Now, I tend to take my guy more fighty. Like, I don't take the Veilwalker all that often. Though I do think Strength 6 can be like a huge trap. I regret taking it in both the games I took it in. Or at least one of the games. I regret taking it in one of the games immensely. Like, it was just a horrible decision in the end, and with how I played it. Anyway, we're not going to go down the Double Herald talk right now. Barbarian Chief, he's been good. Forgot throwing weapons in every single game, and it might have mattered once or twice, but not really. I love this piece. I think the way I've been using him has been really fun. He basically, if you're going to deploy to one side, sometimes you just need an annoying piece to either slow down the other side or go after units. Like, so for example, a lot of units, like smaller scoring units or even some fast cab units, just can't deal with him, right? So he's a chaff piece in a way that like isn't really chaff, right? You can put him in front of, I'll give you an example, 10 Sirens, right? 10 Sirens, unless they have really good magic support, probably won't beat him because they still 1-up save, they have AP1, blah, blah, blah. So the fact that you can like keep running in front of them, like you're chaffing them without, you're always a threat to them, but they're not as big of a threat to you. Or like really small scoring units, like he beat off 15 Dark Elf Spearmen, which isn't crazy. They didn't have a banner. They come in, they charge, they have a banner, 2 ranks, he kills 1, they don't have a rank, he makes a rerollable 8, and now he's all of a sudden a 1-up save versus a unit of AP1. He probably wins by 1 or 2, and maybe he breaks through, or maybe he doesn't. But he's only 285 points, and he's super fast. And so like I've had him like hunt down units and flags because like they hide them, and he's good enough to get back there. So I love him. I think he's really good in the product. He's going to be a casualty of the point breaks in Warriors of Dark Gods, and you'll see as we talk through. So Lust Core has been great. This unit has flares, amazing. Could you do 1 flare, 1 dogs? Probably. Having 1 flare as backup, the fact that you can redeploy easily. You can, if 1's left, you're probably going to make the panic check. It moves 20. It's an 8. You don't need your Herald near them to do anything. It's just been, having good chaff has just been good. The champions, there's a lot of tricks with the champions that I have yet to come to fruition yet, though for 10 points, it's whatever, right? They're just, I don't have anything else to spend the points on. Maybe a champ on the Feldrix would be better. But I don't want, the setup of monsters has been good. I've actually enjoyed having a great weapon Elder. I don't feel like it's been a burden to not have 2 paired weapons. He hasn't done anything special yet, but he's had some decent combats and had some moments where he could be. It wasn't, put it this way, it wasn't that his, I'll say, quote-unquote, failure wasn't due to him being a great weapon. It was just, you have 2 elders, and sometimes they shoot at one of them, and sometimes they don't make it there. Stuff like that. For second one, Gus, can't complain. He's annoying. He does his thing. Still got to get better with him personally. The matchups I've been in haven't been the best for him, right? I played against Pyro, shooty ogres that killed him in like a turn, which was a little unfortunate, to be fair. He took a lot more wounds than he should have. Then, Div, poison shooting, Treeman. He actually lived a lot that game, but just having played against a Div Master, he's like the prime target other than Herald. And the Herald, but he's like the prime because you get 1 Fate's Judgment and it's like D6 wounds, he could die in 1 shot. And then 2 Dark Elves, which he does damage because he's not gonna. If he doesn't die in one round, then they're guaranteed taking 2d6 plus 6. But the light shooting with tons of shots plus just +1 to wound is not as prime. Like, it's not like this is the greatest matchup for the Forsaken one. So he's been good, and I don't blame him for anything he's done. Feldrakes have been the worst unit by far. So we took them because they're a 4th scoring unit. They're fast. They have 9 strength, 6 attacks. Great. I just don't like them. They just have like the minimal impact, albeit one game they just did the objective. I didn't even need them to do the objective. Another game they did something good and then ran through dangerous terrain, took 3 wounds, and panicked. It was only 4 checks. It was 4. Yeah, that sucked. I had to take 4 checks to flank a treeman, and I failed 3 of them and failed my 9 leadership check and ran instead of flanking him, which would have been nice. They're just mediocre. They're 370 points. They're not even. They just don't feel special to me. I don't want to say they're bad. I think that's unfair to them because I don't think they're bad. I just haven't been impressed with them to the point that I'm like, man, I'm glad I have this unit. If it wasn't that they're just scoring and fast, I wouldn't care. They don't win me games. They don't lose me games. They're scoring. They're not strong enough to go in the center by themselves. A lot of times they end up fleeing and stuff. And sure, some of that might be matchups. It's probably not the most fair. I play a lot of Dark Elves. And they're not the best versus Dark Elves because of +1 to wound. And they only have 9 attacks. I mean, they're okay versus Dark Elves, I guess. Anyway, the list has been pretty good. So we'll talk about some ideas potentially for upcoming things to change and things to test. So this is the German ETC list, which is obviously very close to what we were just showing. The big difference is the flares drop for dogs, and the chief and the Feldrakes become the chosen knight. So we've actually talked about this list beforehand, and I think there's a whole discussion to be about whether you want the chosen knights or not. Especially considering the flaming standard. I think there needs to be some sort of analysis you could do maybe with something like this where you say, okay, when is flaming good, when is it not good? So if you'd remove... So let's just think of some basics, I guess you could start with. We kind of like the magic setup. This. I guess, yeah. So when I was talking about how we don't change our list much, I think this is where we're at, right? We can say we like the magic setup. We're chill with that. We think it is just enough magic. We'll say quote unquote perfect. Then we can say we always want 2 chaff pieces. So how are we going to get them? It's either flares and dogs or just... And we do say that we don't like just dogs. I think 2 dog units suck. They don't. I think 1 dog unit's fine. I think having only 2 dog units as your chaff, I think really limits you as warriors. I don't like it. Personally, it's not my biggest fan. I know the Denmark list did it, and I think that, yeah, I just don't love it. We had a whole discussion about it on another video, so if you want to hear about it, go there. Scoring is another one, right? So 3 versus 4 scoring is probably a big debate right now. 4 scoring like this is really strong. Less core. 3 times less core might be the best core in the game for its points. I mean, less warriors are just really good. And, something Thomas and I talked about the other day is, I think we were talking about Furion or something and how he just moves very well. And, pretty much every move he does, the units feel like they're in a really good position. Like, he really thinks about the best place to put even his smallest units. Now, he doesn't take very many small units. It's not like he takes a huge MSU army. It's like, 3 flyers and big sea guard and stuff. So, we were thinking about it on our own, and I think we both agree that, we don't put our less war units in, the greatest spot ever. We kind of just put it there and then it does its thing, and sometimes it's maybe should be tilted a little differently. So, but when you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 11 single model or unit type things, it's kind of harder to do it. So many units. So, less warriors are just super good. Strider, Flea, scoring, they're tougher than people think. So, having those 3 scoring is probably really good. And then if you want to start doing things like changing out for 2 dogs or putting a dog in Barb Horseman, it's fine. I don't think it's better though. Somebody might have told us this. We're going to take credit for it just because, or I said I was going to take credit for it. But this unit, right? So just take away the 3 banners if you want min-core. But there's something to be said about taking an envy unit with paired weapons and 2 lusts. So usually on a map, there is only a couple places you need Strider for. You don't always flee with your warriors also. And to be honest, this unit would pump out 21, strength 4, AP 1, offense 6 attacks that ignore parry. That is not nothing. And they're Swift Stride and they reroll 1. So they go from an average charge of like 11 to an average charge of like, I think it's like 13, but much more reliable. Like making those 6 to 7 charges just becomes way easier with this, which I think is a big deal. So I actually think that the meta word, could be trying a 1 envy, 2 lust units in core and just really thinking about where you put your envy ones to be the most impactful. Because like I said, you're not always fleeing with lust. And yes, it's nice to have, and you got to be wary that you can't flee with envy, but sometimes just going in and charging, especially when you have Glory of Gold. Glory of Gold on this unit, like I said, 21 attacks, offense 6, probably hitting on 3s. But versus most things, even half the characters in the game aren't even that good. And then you get 4s rerollable with AP2. Could be really good. So we want to try having this core set up without the banners. This just happened to have points in it. So that's one thing. And then we got into this idea of, this has it. So this is kind of the idea. Well, see, it's tough because you have this construct, right? And now kind of the big debate Thomas and I have been Chosen Knights with Flaming versus something like this Chosen Lord with Entropic. So this is not the build exactly that Wilhelm took, but it's a version of it. So he took no banner, no trophy rack, and sloth. And we took lust with trophy rack. I think you kind of have to. I think lust is really good. I mean, being res 6 is super nice, but so is being able to flee and being immune to like all the freaking terrain. I think you're more likely to take a wound from DTs than from like strength T5 versus T6 mattering that much in half the games. And maybe that's untrue because you just have to avoid all of them. But now he can stand behind a wall and not worry about taking a wound by going over it. So I think that's amazing. Trophy rack, I feel like, is also a must. Your leadership 9, you want to re-roll those March doesn't matter. You want to re-roll those combat checks, whether it's fleeing, pursuing, or redirect checks. And also, just the fact that people are going to feed you champions and now you get +1 res for the rest of the game is also super nice. So Trophy rack seems like a must on this guy, personally, if you have the points. In fact, he probably should have did it in his ET list. He probably should have dropped the 1 great weapon for it. It was probably worth it more than the paired weapon upgrade. But I digress from that. So, like I said, I took Flaming Standard on mine. I have 30 points in banners here, and I have 2 champions. So technically, I have probably like 85 points of things. That is a little bit much, but there's really nowhere else to put them. Where else would you put it? That being said, this list only has 3 scoring, and then you get this really strong piece in this guy who potentially changes some matchups for you. And so the question really to be said potentially would be, first off, one question I want answered is, how does 3 scoring work with Like, you could do lashes, I guess, would be pretty cool. If you drop this banner and drop the champs and go lashes, might be interesting. Anyway, I digress. That's not what this is about. We were talking about, we're at this point in almost like a meta conversation where we kind of have the core of the army, which is some monsters, this, and the core, and some two chaff in some capacity. And so you want to be able to kind of fix some weaknesses in the army and what you see matchup wise. And you do a whole video on like this idea that, in this particular example, we would say each army has its one build, but honestly, there's probably 30 to 40, I'll say quote unquote builds out there. And builds would mean that like significantly different types of armies, right? I'll give you DL are probably the best example because you can do the Scourge Kurdistan that's popularized by Paul from Germany, or there's more of like the Sentinel builds out there without Scourge. You probably make Scourge and non-Scourge. It's probably the best way to think about it from a warrior's perspective. And so, that's two different builds. Whereas maybe EOS, it's really like the same shit, different day, right? Like either they have a little bit more shooting or they have Inquisitor. You know what I mean? Like you're not tailoring your warriors like the EOS experience is like they have a stank and a cannon and then some other shit. Like, so from our perspective, though the builds might start to vary a little bit unless they're super extreme, you kind of just say, all right, EOS, how do I deal with EOS? And what I'm trying to get at is you could make a chart of all the armies and kind of say, okay, how does this army look today? What's the general rating of that army? What are some pieces in it that give me trouble? And then does a unit fix that problem? Especially if we're condensed to saying it's basically like Chosen Lord. Like you could narrow it down to basically in this list, it's the Chosen Lord versus if you look at the German list, it's the Chosen Knights, and then this unit becomes, you have to downgrade the Warhounds, right? And you lose some banners, but that's not a big deal. Now, in the new idea, you could say, go somewhere in between, where you actually upgrade, you downgrade the Knights to be Warrior Knights, and so you save 145 points here. But you get the fourth scoring that has Flaming Banner or Wasteland Torch in this particular example, right? Which is actually a pretty cool item to talk about real quick. It's 5 points less than Flaming Banner, which has no bearing on this list particularly, but it could in some lists. But it basically says, okay, it's like half a Strider banner. I would call it 0.8 of a Strider banner because, yes, it's only Strider runes. You still have to deal with lakes aren't a huge deal. You still have to deal with forests, but because you can turn one of the forests into a runes with the banner, it actually is, I say 0.8 because if there's a really poorly placed forest that you want to go into, just make it the runes. So you really are only, and then, the fact that half your army otherwise is Lust is actually really good for you, and runes are better and worse for opponents usually, because you can just put your Strider units in them. It's actually a really nice banner from that perspective. The flaming part is good and bad. Usually, the fact that you have flaming first round all the time is fine. Yes, there are some 2+ save Dragonbane Gem heroes, but you would just challenge them anyway, probably. Like, they're not coming into 10 Knights and being like, well, at least round 1 I get to have a ward save. And then it's good and bad because you can get multiple uses out of it. Like if people chaff you, you can still get reroll a wound off, or if you just don't want it, it has some bad points to it. If you're in a prolonged fight with something that's flammable, let's say trolls or something, and you probably want to have flaming all the time. So it has its uses and it has its unuses, I'd say, non-uses. We would try it at least. It doesn't matter. Anyway, this is an in-between, where essentially you downgrade the Knights and then upgrade an Elder to the Chosen Lord. And so, if you look at this one next to the German list, you're saying, okay, This guy is instead of one of the elders. This is the downgrade of the knights, and then you get a flare unit instead of the dog. So I think it feels weird to drop the elder, but at the same time, so this list is not as fast on the flanks because Forsaken one and 2 chariot guys are not as quick to go around the flanks. But at the same time, this guy maybe deals with a lot more things than the elder would. And then, like I said, you have the 3 scoring list, which is like you get both of them. You get a really good, or you don't get the scoring unit, and you basically turn that scoring unit into an elder and some other things, which kind of feels weird a little bit, right? Remember I said we had 85 points like lying in the middle of this army? That 85 points turns this elder into a 10-man knight unit, which the question would be, is it better or not? So this is something interesting to try. It feels weird to lose an elder probably, but at the same time, maybe it makes sense. Maybe it just makes sense to have a stronger guy. But as I was saying, let's just say that this is like the compromise where you get entropic and flaming unit and fort scoring. And so you could do something in this case where, you know, you could do like flaming and you could do entropic, right? And so first off, I do think the 3 scoring versus 4 scoring is kind of interesting. Let's just talk about that for a second. So in flags, it's better to have the 3 scoring. There's nothing else to be said. I mean, you also have to go on the idea that, like, there's 2 ways to think about this. One is just from a scoring perspective. How do you handle the objectives, right? Can you handle, if you wanted to, let's just say that we didn't have this middle ground, right? This middle ground army, which has a little bit of both, and you drop an elder. Let's just say we're going for, hey, this is my 3 scoring idea, where it's just core, chaff, and single models, right? This is 6 strong single models, 3 scoring in core, and 2 chaff, and they all do something a little bit. And you say the German list, for example, which has a really strong Chosen Knight unit. It's 5 single models. It's basically the change of the Chosen Knights for the character, right? So let's just say we boil it down to 5 Chosen Knights versus a Chosen Lord. Let's just say that was the comparison we were trying to make, right? Then you would say, okay, it's these 2, right? It's these 2. And you got to remember that there's a scoring component here and here, and then there's what they do. So what they do is probably more important, but the scoring is a big one. If we want to talk about scoring real quick, 3 versus 4, hold the center. For having 4 is better. You have a strong centralized scoring unit and Chosen Knights. They can zone things. In spoils, it's probably better to have the 4th. Flags, it's better to have the 3 because you don't really have to commit them, though they are pretty good. In breakthrough, I mean, 4 is just better, right? In everything but flags, 4 is probably always going to be better. And so the question, that's a really an unfair topic to discuss. The question should be, can you win with 3 scoring? And the answer is probably you can. So let's start with the other side of the question, which I should have started with, which is, which deals with more problems, right? The Flaming Chosen versus the Entropic Lord, right? So Entropic Lord, right? He makes this matchup kind of nice because the Spear guy and the Nova Griffin guy have trouble with him. He can be shot by bolt throwers, but he's probably going to be behind walls and in cover. He still has toughness 5 with a 1-up, 5-up, so, But he deals with the Entropic guy, the Spear / Nova. He can basically go into the Sea Guard by himself and not give a shit because the Sea Guard aren't strong enough to kill him. And the Spear guy will just lose to him because he doesn't get his weapon. He'll just smash him. He'll smash everybody in that unit, right? So he helps this matchup a lot. The Nova Griffin guy loses whatever armors he has, and loses the killing blow or the lethal strike lance. He probably loses to this guy, especially if he charges him. He's only good for 1 round. So he helps, for sure. You could go and say versus KOE, like the heroes. He's actually very good versus the KOE heroes because KOE has very good armors and very good items. So, if people are doing like super strong, supernatural dex type stuff or whatever type lances or the Tristan's Resolve shit, he can actually, or they have like all that reroll to ones crap they have in their armor. Like he's very good versus the heroes. I don't know. I mean, just looking through here, you go through and say this, right? Like there's nothing in SE. Sure, the Titanic Might heroes are pretty juicy for him to go after, but I don't know if there's such a big deal for the army that, like, Omen of Apocalypse here. He can go in and kill the Omen of Apocalypse guy, for example. He's good versus some of the Inquisitors, not even probably that much. He doesn't do anything versus Demons special. Dwarves, the Dwarf Lords. I mean, turning off the Dwarf Lord's items basically makes them... I mean, he actually is very good versus the Dwarf Lords. Assuming he doesn't get shot before he goes in, he basically turns them into garbage, right? Because they all depend on their armors and their souped-up weapons, and he just says, nope, you just have a normal pair, no more D3 wounds, no more nothing, you're garbage, and I'll kill you because your armor is gone. So, I mean, he's actually very good in the Dwarf game. He's good versus these heroes. You could say more generally stated that warriors sometimes struggle with like really good save strong heroes, like 1-up rollable heroes. We have a lot of strength 6. We don't have a ton of strength 8. That's one reason why the Great Weapon Elder is kind of nice. So yeah, it's like it doesn't matter at that point. Like it's kind of nice to have it. He's good versus hunters, I guess. Some of them have weapons. They all have armors, so in that case, he's good. So yeah, you could go through and say, okay, we need him here. But then you could go also say, all right, what about Flaming Chosen? So besides being scoring, what's very popular? Treemen. Flaming Chosen are just really good against Treemen. They hit them on 3s. You get Flaming, so you get reroll a wound. They only have, they hit you on 4s, so their crush attack is a 50-50 that they might not want to take. Like, it's just, if you think, or trolls. Everybody seems to be running an 8-man unit of trolls, and all of a sudden you go in with flaming paired weapons, you get 1 alchemy spell off, and you are all of a sudden killing like 9 wounds of trolls before they strike. And you're feeling good. I mean, your offense 7 with paired weapons, so depending on which trolls, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 15, 14, 33, right? Just looking at attacks 15, 22. 22 attacks that need 2s and 4s rerollable. Right? So right? So just if you went into trolls, and this is obviously if they weren't -1 to hit. I mean, you do like 13 wounds without the mounts, and the mounts would do another 2 or 3. Like, just the point being is that trolls, from a standpoint of warriors, are kind of an issue because they're big. You don't have enough attacks to really get through them. But having this Flaming Chosen now gives you something that can line up across from them and possibly just either kill them or weaken the unit enough that you could kill it, right? UD and their regenning shit, right? They're just general regen stuff, Forsaken. If you're against a Forsaken one, you don't really need the Flaming form. It does help, but I mean, reroll the wound would obviously help a lot. But you could probably kill the Forsaken one, for example. It doesn't really help for some of these armies. You could go through, people take gas, I guess. People have been taking gas more. It's just like, Arena Beasts. There's a lot more regen stuff that maybe, if you go through all this and you say, because the other experiment isn't just who's more, But how is the matchup otherwise? For example, you might say, man, when I play against Sylvan Elves, my biggest issue is Treeman. And so I would like something that counters the Treeman. And you say, all right, I'll take Flaming Chosen. They should help a lot versus them in the matchup. Whereas you might say, you might say the other, you might say Warriors, for example. You might say, well, Forsaken one in the Warrior versus Warrior matchup, I have a Forsaken one, isn't the biggest deal. It's not like, this isn't the groundbreaker. Actually having this versus Chaos Lords, having the Entropic versus a Chaos Lord with like a Porn or something might just be better for you. Or the matchup doesn't need to get any better. Or a very realistic one is the matchup just doesn't matter, right? You might say, okay, this Entropic guy helps versus, I'm going to give an example. I don't even know if this is true or not. KOE. Let's just KOE. He helps versus KOE. And then you might tell yourself, well, KOE is a bad enough matchup, which is not. I'm just making up stuff. KOE is a bad enough matchup that I don't want to play it anyway, so it doesn't help enough. Let me go help my other matchup, something that might be real. And so, whenever you're making a list, and sometimes you look at Entropic and you think of, oh, look, he's really good here and here and here. And then you say, well, Flaming's really good here and here and here. You have to kind of go to the next step and say, well, how good was it to begin with without either of them? And then who makes it better for you? Does having an answer to Trolls make Warriors easy? Right? Does it? Is that something that you can say, well, okay, if I can just deal with those Trolls, I don't need to worry about Omen of Apocalypse. Maybe it's not popular or something. I can handle the rest. Or Sylvan Elves. Oh, if I can just beat the Treeman, right? Or in KOE, you can say, oh, if I can just deal, zone out his heroes with my Chariot, the matchup becomes super easy. Or maybe that's not the truth. Dwarf Lords is a great example. How many, sure, he can beat Dwarf Lords, but how many times are you charging their busts of Dwarf Lords? You're probably not even charging it. You're probably just avoiding it and killing everything else. And so maybe he takes the matchup to, the problem with Dwarves is the shooting. The Dwarf Lords aren't killing Warrior players. It's the shooting that kills the Warrior players, because the 3-inch move Dwarf Lord you just walk away from. So it's solving an issue. Yes, it's giving you that option to go in and kill him, but at the same time, you might tell yourself, well, I don't need that option per se. I need to deal with the other stuff. And then if I want to kill him, I'll just combo charge and break the unit or something like that. So that's kind of where we're getting at generally. I see this, for example, just because I've played it recently and stuff, I see this as being really nice. I don't really care about VC that much, but I see this as potentially really nice to have the flaming attacks for. And I don't know, maybe it outdoes it. It's very good versus flies, which are really popular, right? Flies. And it's just it's not just about the flaming versus entropic, right? It's also a scoring unit. It's also, in its best world, 16 or so strength. It has better attacks than the Lord, right? The Lord's 5 strength 7, and that unit pumps out potentially 3 strength 6 a model at weapon skill 6. So from a pure fighting standpoint, it's almost as good. It's probably better than the Chaos Lord. I think the only reason you take the Chaos Lord is Entropic and being a single piece that's easier to maneuver. He's also slower because he can't march. So my heart says the Chosen are better, but anyway, that's part of the topic. We've gone much farther than I thought we would. All right. Well, there you go. Debating Entropic versus Flaming. We have a unit that have a list that kind of has both. The Envy Warriors and Core with paired weapons. One unit of them seems pretty nice. And then just generally how Warriors are going. Pretty good. Still very much enjoy playing them. Every game. I think a lot of games just end up being really tough and exciting because you're always fighting, you're always trying to make plays, and that's what I like to do. Sometimes it fails and you get a little frustrated, and I think the key there is to just say, okay, I failed a couple charges that maybe I should have made at least one of them, especially when the charge would be devastating, right? There was a charge or two I failed against the ogres that I was just like, fuck, if I just, it was like a 6 swift. And I was like, if I just make this fucking 6 swift, or this, you know, I think I had a 6, 7, and 5 swift to just wreck and do really good. And I missed all of them. And it happens. It happens. I'm not, there's other plays I could have made better. I'm definitely not blaming just those rolls. But it's hard when you're being aggressive and you're just like, God, if this just would have worked. Because, like, it just ruins the combo charging. And that's the risk of playing armies like this. But at the same time, I like to play that way. So I can only blame myself. But yeah, we'll do videos in the future, something like how to pairing strategies and stuff like that. Maybe just some other stuff too as time goes on. Thanks for listening.